Joining me now is Gordon Chang. Make sure that's Gordon G. Chang if you want to follow him on X. I want to have him on for many reasons, a lot of activity dealing with Taiwan and Japan and China, but also this. When I saw this the other night, I thought, oof, we've got to get Mr. Chang back on. You remember this, you saw it, but let's set it up again for those who maybe haven't. 600,000 Chinese students need to come to America, and why? Watch this.
600,000 Chinese students could come to the United States. Why, sir, is that a pro-MAGA position when so many American kids want to go to school and there are places not for them and these universities are getting rich off Chinese money?
Sure. Never said about China, but we do have a lot of people coming in from China. We always have China and other countries. We also have a massive system of colleges and universities. And if we were to cut that in half, which perhaps makes some people happy, you would have half the colleges in the United States go out of business.
So what?
Well, I think that's a big deal.
Are they fans,
you would have the
fans of the United States?
Yeah, but you would have, as you know, historically, black colleges and universities would all be out of business. You would have a system of colleges and universities.
So we're dependent on China to keep our university system going?
But I think it's good to have, I actually think it's good to have outside countries. Look, I want to be able to get along with the world.
They're not the French. They're the Chinese. They spy on us. They steal our intellectual property.
What, do you think the French are better?
Yeah.
Really? I don't know. I'll tell you, I'm not so sure. We've had a lot of problems with the French.
All right, let's hold right there. I don't remember ever seeing Laura Ingraham push back so much. And she did that on a couple occasions in this interview. I thought she did a remarkable job. I thought it took a lot. Well, she's a trained attorney, and she's been in the policy world a long time. But I thought that took a lot of courage on her part, or frustration, or both. But I was glad she did that. Joining me now is Gordon Chang. Mr. Chang, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon. And Laura, like you, is a hero.
Well, thank you. Have you ever seen her push back so much?
No. And as you're right, she pushed back on a number of issues during that interview, but especially with the 600,000 Chinese students. And, Trump gave her answers. I don't think Trump's answers were correct. I think they were misguided. And Laura stood up to him.
So 600,000, we need the 600,000 Chinese students in here. Otherwise, these universities collapse. Like she said, so what? These are not pro-American universities. We were just reporting on the Worldview Report tonight about one of these universities that is got a curriculum that is just absolutely pro-Maoist and quoting Black Panther Angela Davis. I mean, this is the kind of garbage going on these campuses.
Yes, and part of it is because the Chinese students are there. So these universities, they self-censor. They don't allow Tibetan voices, for instance. They don't allow voices of Chinese dissidents because they're worried about what the Communist Party will do to them. So, there's always a problem with woke ideology among the left, and it's taken over universities. But it's made so much more worse because of the Chinese Communist Party.
What do you think has gotten into President Trump? We ask a lot of guests this. He's not the same president that he was in his first term. I'm assuming you would probably agree with that. And if you do, why do you think that's the case?
Well, I certainly agree with you. And I think that he, it's just my guess, but, he's always been very pro-business, and he views this as an issue of bringing money into the United States. And yes, Chinese students do account for, I don't know, it was like $13 billion or so of services income. But the point is, or it might have been a little bit less, but the point is that I think Trump is looking at it that way. And he's probably thinking he doesn't want to disrupt events before the midterms. I don't know what's going through his mind, but I can tell you this, he's absolutely wrong. We had about 277,000 Chinese nationals in our colleges and universities in the school year that ended in 24. So it's basically Trump is talking about doubling that. And clearly we've got a problem. Chinese students have been engaged in espionage. They've been engaged in acts coercing other students. This is a problem. And we know that it's been going on for decades. Trump's not the only one guilty of this. But we have allowed the Chinese diplomats and Ministry of State security agents to operate these large networks that monitor, coerce, and surveil Chinese students and other students for that matter. And this is our country, Brandon. We shouldn't put up with this.
That's right. And now the H-1B visas, that's really going viral today. A lot of people upset. A lot of MAGA base, are frustrated. A lot of the young guys are frustrated because they were, counting on jobs and they're having a hard time finding jobs. And a lot of companies are still doing the diversity thing and quota thing. And they can't compete with foreign labor being brought in, or foreign labor brought in who then contract out to more foreign labor overseas when they get into the management at these companies. We're experiencing that. You were at our national conference. You were here in Carterville. And we just had an article written about our town. There's a national article written about our town on how many folks from India are here. The CEO of FedEx is a gentleman from India, and he's bringing in a lot of Indian workers. And apparently, we see that around town. They're hard workers. They tend to be very dedicated to their families. So I'm not going after them. I'm going after the American corporations. I don't blame them. I understand what it is they're doing for themselves and their family. But they get into management, and we're told that they hire a lot of people back over in India to do work over there. And we're seeing this in our own town right here. And this is being duplicated around the country. How much of this is happening with HB1 visas when it comes to Chinese experts in computers and technology?
Well, it's a lot less than with the Indian H-1Bs. The point here, whether we're talking about Chinese, Indians, or Albanians, the point here is that America should be for Americans, and Americans can't get jobs because of the abuse of the H-1B program. So really what we're talking about now is that a whole generation of Americans are denied basic opportunities in their own country, in our own country, Brandon.
And China doesn't do that to their young people, do they?
No. And matter of fact, there are foreign workers in China, but, we're seeing the same thing in China. Chinese are starting to say, why are you bringing in all these foreigners? So this is something which is common. And I think that President Trump needs to go back and rethink what MAGA actually means. I mean, he told Laura that MAGA wants additional Chinese students in our country. I actually don't think so.
No, they don't. Well, someone said he should go do a MAGA rally. He needs to go back out, do some MAGA rallies, and get connected back with his base. Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen said if he went to his own MAGA rally right now, he might get booed, right? He might get booed by some of the people. They had no problem booing him when he would bring up the COVID shot, right? And he was like, whoa. So I don't know. He could start talking about jobs and whatnot, and people might not be happy. He may not get a good response, but he's going to have to correct course quickly.
Yes. There's also a broader context to this. When President Trump in rallies, he says how great his relationship is with Xi Jinping or with Kim Jong-un. He doesn't get a good reaction out of that either. And I think that Trump is, and I don't, not in his head, of course, but the point is that he has views right now that are angering big portions of the American public, whether you call them MAGA or not. Trump is getting out of touch with important elements in the American society, and some of them are his supporters.
Now, let's talk about an area. We'll try to be balanced here, try to be. Let's see if we can find something where we might agree with President Trump. How about the area of Venezuela? Now, I've been concerned, as I think you have been too, about the influence of China, Hezbollah, Iran, Russia, Cuba in Venezuela. And now we have a headline at Fox: China moves into Venezuela as Maduro regime gets Beijing lifeline amid U.S. tensions. Well, we've been hearing for some time. We were reporting several years ago about the commander of Southcom saying China's in our backyard, referring to, South America. We know that Iran is there as well, and I'm concerned about hypersonic missiles going in there. So are the organizations that they've organized here working together? China, Russia, Iran, are they all working together to be in our backyard with hypersonic missiles and use that as some kind of blackmail against us? Or just intimidation? Are we going to find ourselves in a Venezuelan missile crisis like Cuba?
We could very well. And we could also end up with a second Cuban missile crisis, except instead of the Soviets, we could have the Chinese. And what President Trump is doing in our hemisphere is 100% right. He is actually showing political will and kicking the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians out. Now, he's got a long way to go. But for instance, targeting these drug boats in international water, where he's getting a lot of heat for it. But thank God he's continuing it, because Venezuela has been attacking the United States. It's been doing it with drugs. And we know it goes to the top of the Venezuelan regime, the cartel of the Suns. That's not gangsters. Those are Venezuelan military officers and Maduro himself. Plus also those caravans during the Biden administration, those were organized by Venezuela to attack American sovereignty. We know that from the funding for those NGOs, quote unquote, that were organizing the caravans. They had the backing of the Venezuelan government. So, President Trump has said, no, I'm not putting up with this. And that's great, because we haven't had a president who has taken that view.
Tell me about what's going on, the latest with China and Taiwan. I hear they're positioning some boats and exercises and different things. Tell us the latest.
Yeah, this has actually been quiet recently, and it's because China has been taking on both the Philippines and Japan, shifting its focus. Now, that's not to say that China has abandoned its plans to take over Taiwan. By no means. They've shifted their tactics, and we see some of the hostile military maneuvers with the boats and the planes circling Taiwan. But mostly with regard to Taiwan these days, we see China trying to infiltrate Taiwanese society. And they've been actually quite successful with that. But when it comes to China's military pressure, recently there have been some very belligerent moves against Japan and some belligerent and continuing belligerent moves against the Philippines. And that's where China's military focus has been over the last several months.
What about Chinese fishing boats in our waters? That's in Alaska, correct?
That's in Alaska, but we also seen recently the Chinese fishing fleets pressure Argentina. And there, the U.S. Coast Guard has been cooperating with the Argentine Coast Guard to try to protect their waters. But, these Chinese fleets are predatory. They're off of Argentina, they're off of Chile, they're off of so many other countries, but including ours, which just shows you how aggressive and brazen the Chinese have been recently. They just don't care. They just think that they can violate other countries' sovereignty. And, part of it is, Brandon, we've had presidents, both parties, liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats, that have allowed the Chinese to violate our sovereignty, both on our soil and in our waters. So, of course, the Chinese are taking advantage of us. And the one thing that President Trump has been doing is he's saying, not on his watch. And that's great.
Yeah, that is good. What about South Korea? What is the latest there?
Within the last 24, 36 hours, the South Korean government has sent 100 police officers with search and arrest warrants, and they took into custody the former Prime Minister Wong. And this follows this week additional charges against the former president, Yoon Suk-yeol. He was arrested on Monday for aiding an enemy state. He's already in state custody for quote unquote insurrection. All of these charges, Brandon, are bogus. What we are seeing is the end of democracy. Lee Jae-myung is, who's the president. He stole an election, or at least he engaged in widespread irregularities in the June 3 snap election. And he's now using all the levers of state power to turn to South Korea at least into an authoritarian state, and maybe going to full totalitarianism. He's certainly moving South Korea into China's orbit. And the Trump administration needs to say something about this, because we could end up 6 months, 9 months from now, where we have a military alliance with essentially a communist state. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying that's the trend right now, and we better stop it.
And what does South Korea have that North Korea wants, what that the communists want, other than people? What is it? Assets? Is it minerals? Is there? Is it the what? There must be something they're after other than just more land.
Yeah, there are a couple things. The most important is they need legitimacy in North Korea. You've got two Korean states. The Koreans in the North, they're willing to sacrifice, but they look at the people in the South and it's prosperous. And they ask, how come they're not prosperous? So it's an issue of legitimacy. And that means that North Korea needs to destroy South Korea. Even if South Korea ends up to be a radioactive heap, that's okay with regard from the North Korean Kim Jong-un's point of view, because he's eliminated the number one threat, the existential threat to his regime. Now, the Chinese probably view it a little bit differently. They want Samsung. Samsung makes about 8% of the world's most sophisticated chips. They want its technology. They want the business in South Korea. And they want to eliminate democracy. Because again, any democracy, especially one on China's periphery, is an existential threat in the view of the Communist Party.
Now, there's been a lot of back and forth with China and Japan. I think one of China's folks talked about beheading one of Japan's leaders, right?
The Osaka General Counsel for China 3 or 4 days ago posted that that if the Japanese Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, continued to stick her head in places where it shouldn't be, that it should be cut off. Now, this mirrors language that this Consul General used against Pete Hegseth about a month or so ago. And then also, this was not just some sort of rogue Consul General, because we know that as the Consul General was talking about assassination of the Japanese Prime Minister, a Chinese fishing boat rammed a Japanese Coast Guard vessel in Japanese waters.
Is that this footage right here, Mr. Chang? Is that this footage right here?
Yes, I believe so. Yep.
And so that is a Chinese boat ramming
Fishing boat vessel.
Yeah. That's a Japanese fishing vessel?
No, that's a Chinese
fishing vessel. That's a Chinese vessel. Okay. And what did they end up doing?
The Chinese fishing vessel tried to ram the Japanese Coast Guard vessel, and I think actually succeeded. So that's a little bit unclear, and you can see it right here.
There you go. There's a contact. So why would a Chinese fishing vessel want to do that? Are the Chinese using these fishing vessels as decoys? Are those really Chinese fishermen, or is there more going on, or is that just angry Chinese doing that? In other words, we've heard of countries using fishing vessels, maybe putting a Club K cargo system on a fishing vessel, different things. So I guess what I'm getting at is this trying to use a fishing vessel to do something that undercover, a little camouflage, or is this Chinese fishermen that are really upset?
Yeah. Well, the Chinese fishermen, there's over 500,000 Chinese fishing boats. They call it the Little Blue Men, or the Blue Hulls. And they're used as essentially part of the Chinese Navy. The Chinese have what called gray hulls, which is the formal Navy, the white hulls, which is the Coast Guard, and the blue hulls, which are the Marine militia, which is what you see on this video. And the Chinese try to take over Japanese territory. And they've been doing this, especially there was the big incidents in 2010, where the Japanese actually seized a Chinese fishing boat in circumstances similar to this one. And China then imposed a rare earth embargo on exports of those items to Japan. So this has been a long-running dispute. You know, the Japanese and the Chinese have overlapping territorial claims. The Chinese claims, by the way, are almost baseless. But the point is that China has been enforcing its claims through forceful tactics like the one that you see here.
So what is the end game for China when it comes to Japan? I mean, we've talked a lot about China going against Taiwan. What's the end game of China for Japan?
Well, first of all, Chinese leader Xi Jinping has been pushing the imperial era notion that China is the world's only legitimate state. So Japan claims, of course, its own sovereignty, and that is an affront to the Chinese. And by the way, our sovereignty is an affront to the Chinese as well, because they believe that we're not legitimate. They don't believe the Japanese are legitimate. But there are a couple other things with regard to Japan, and that is that Japan and Taiwan actually are on the same archipelago. And the Japanese, understand that if the Chinese seize Taiwan, that their security is endangered. So Japan has been very vocal and very resolute. And that's what gave rise to that comment from the Osaka Consul General, because Takeichi said that if China were to seize Taiwan, then Japan would have to mobilize. And that's just very clear that Japan would have to do that. So really what you've got is Japan is seen as a stumbling block to China annexing Taiwan.
And then let me ask you about Pete Hegseth. He's out saying, look, we've got to get on a war footing. And they want to be known as the Secretary of War, not the Defense Department. I guess the defense word is gone. It's the War Department now, and the Secretary of War. And we need to get on a war footing. What, if you had to guess, and maybe you know, so maybe you don't need a guess, but what do you think? If there's a war coming, where does it happen first, and where does it spill over to after that?
I don't know the answer to the question, but I suspect that if a war starts, it starts on American soil. And the reason is that the Chinese want to get the United States, make sure that we're not in the fight. And we've got Chinese agents and operatives and soldiers on our soil in cells, and we know that they are ready to strike. So yes, there will be a war, or I think there'll be a war, and it'll start here. One way this war starts is we know that the Chinese had at least one secret biological weapons lab. It was in Reedley, California. And inside they had at least 20 pathogens, according to the official account, and almost 1,000 mice that have been genetically engineered to spread disease. So the war starts, perhaps, at least I think, it would start with strange diseases showing up in the United States, and they would be spread by the Chinese. And that is to disable us and to make sure that we're not being able to defend our friends and allies. And
didn't we just see some professors tied to the University of Michigan coming in with more pathogens, or trying to?
Yes. In June, they were caught or charged with trying to smuggle in a fungus. And then just a week ago, 3 more Chinese nationals were charged with trying to smuggle in roundworms. And, people may say, well, we have that fungus and we have those roundworms in our country. So why were the Chinese trying to do this? And the reason is, especially with the fungus, it's almost certain that the fungus that were brought in were genetically modified. So they weren't in our country. And it's probably true with regard to the roundworms as well. This is part of, I believe, a coordinated and sustained attack against American agriculture. They are trying to plant invasive species here. They're trying to spread diseases. They're going after our food supply. So these roundworms and this fungus, these are weapons of mass destruction, Brandon. And this was an attack on the United States. And instead of sending these Chinese nationals through the federal judicial system, I think they should have been sent to Guantanamo.
And then in regards to these strike forces that look like they've been moved up from April of 2026 to January 1st of 2026, strike forces ready to go to all 50 states. Do you think this has to do with your thoughts that the next war could start right here on our soil? Do you think our government is aware of something that's making them move this date up for these strike forces?
Yeah, our government is aware of these Chinese networks, but the problem is that it's not the priority that it needs to be. I don't think anyone who's in the United States illegally should be allowed to remain, but I don't think that Tom Holman should be going after poor Mexicans at Home Depot parking lots. What he should be doing is going after Chinese and Iranians and Russians who are here prepared to kill Americans in large numbers. So we need to have a change, a reordering of priority of ICE. We need to go after the most dangerous elements. We know who they are. We know where they are. And yet we allow those networks in our country to remain.
Is that because of money? Is it money? Is it business with China? Like, President Trump wants the 600,000 students here. We're not going to crack down on the Chinese people that have come here illegally that you're warning about and have been warning about. But we're going to go after the Mexicans, as you say, that are coming over here to work. Not that I want to see us be flooded with anybody from all kinds of places, but the Mexican painter or the Mexican carpenter is not a threat like the Chinese terrorist. So why do the Mexicans get nabbed, but we're not going after the Chinese? Does it have to do with the money situation with Xi Jinping in China?
Yeah, well, I'm not in Tom Holman's head either, but I don't think it's money. I think that it is a failure to appreciate the severity of the threat and the urgency of the threat. It is just a failure across the American political system to understand what is occurring and what could occur. So I chalk this up to a general lack of understanding. Remember, we did not understand the threat from Osama bin Laden, and we didn't even understand it after he killed 6 Americans in February of 1993 with the bombing in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. We just couldn't care less. So, yeah, it's inherent in American democracy that we have just oblivious.
One final point. Here is Marco Rubio. I think this is from this afternoon, this evening.
Trump's pledge to resume testing of our nuclear capabilities, that includes delivery systems, is on par with what other countries around the world are doing. We got to make sure these things work and that they're safe. In terms of the Chinese nuclear program, that wasn't discussed in any of our meetings. That's something that happened at the staff level, but these are longstanding concerns. I mean, the Chinese are undertaking the most rapid military buildup in human history. So, and part of that is their expansion of their nuclear capabilities. So obviously we're keeping an eye on that, and I think everybody's concerned about that.
Wow, most rapid buildup military capabilities in world history.
I love Marco Rubio, but I doubt that that's right. I think that the buildup of the United States prior to World War II was more rapid. But I get the point. It is the most rapid and the largest buildup since World War II. And we know that no nation threatens China. So we know that China is intending to go to war against others. As I mentioned, the Chinese leadership believes it has a right to rule the world. Matter of fact, Xi Jinping's officials in 2017 started talking about ruling the Mars and the Moon and considering them as sovereign Chinese territory. So Xi Jinping is the most ambitious aggressor in history. And that's why they want that military. And by the way, the Chinese probably have been testing nuclear weapons with fissile material in very small tests. So yes, it's very good for President Trump to say, look, we're going to do the same thing. That's absolutely necessary.
You are a very busy man. There's a lot going on in your wheelhouse, your area of expertise, and we're glad to have you back on. Folks, why don't you follow him right now, at Gordon G. Chang, at Gordon G. Chang. He writes a column regularly over at the Gatestone Institute, and of course, GordonChang.com, GordonChang.com. The best thing to do is follow him at Gordon G. Chang, as he puts up a lot of commentary and links and all the interviews that he does, and he's a very busy guy when it comes to writing columns and doing interviews. I don't think we've had you on since you were with us at our national conference. It was great to have you here with us, have your lovely wife as well. We just had a wonderful time, and you have a sense of humor that came out on the stage that I did not know you had. I said later, if he ever decides he doesn't want to write on geopolitics and national security, he could take it on the road. Boy, I did not realize you had such a witty sense of humor. You had him laughing quite a bit during a rather serious presentation, but we guys got so many wonderful reports. So thank you for being here for that national conference.
Well, Lydia and I can't tell you how much we appreciated your hospitality, Brandon, and how much fun we had at the national conference. And so we are very, very thankful to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. We look forward to having you back. Greet your lovely wife, and thanks again for making time for us tonight.
Well, thank you, Brandon.
Gordon G. Chang checking in tonight. Check out his site on X, at Gordon G. Chang, at Gordon G. Chang. And he's got a lot of books, folks, including the one recently on the China plan. It's not a very long book. So if you're trying to get someone to read a book, maybe they won't read a long book. This is a nice size book. They could actually read it in one setting and get an understanding of what China's plans are. The China plan, you'll find it on Amazon. Just type in Gordon G. Chang on Amazon. You'll see all of his many books there. And of course, he's doing so many interviews daily. And if you follow him on X at Gordon G. Chang, he is very good about putting up the interviews he's doing and in what time, so you can keep track, as well as a link to all of his columns and where he's speaking and everything else. So I check his Twitter feed quite a bit, at Gordon G. Chang. We'll be right back after this break. Take a look at this picture. This is my beautiful wife. Does that look like a grandmother to you? Seriously, does that look like a grandmother to you? Well, she is. I took this picture on August 31st, 2025. Now, you want to know how she stays so young and beautiful looking? Well, I'll tell you right now, she does three things for sure. She takes new meat every day that's loaded with glutathione to detox your cells. She also takes Bella Grace each and every day, loaded with 3 powerful ingredients. And she takes Gatatana, 1 scoop, the equivalent of 90 billion plant cells. So you can get all of these products that she and myself take each and every day at worldviewtube.com/sponsors. worldviewtube.com/sponsors. It's a great way to support your health and also our broadcast network as we continue to push out free Christian worldview programming. worldviewtube.com/sponsors.